So welcome to the second half of our Sangha Morning. This morning I'm going to read you a story. There's a bit of background to choosing this particular story. So at solstice, I was messing about with my runes, as you do, and I drew the warrior rune for this year. So that led to me reflecting on, what does it mean to be a warrior in the spiritual life? So I imagine that most of you, if not everybody, are familiar with the story of the attack of the Mara's hordes as the Buddha to be sat under the Bodhi tree in the evening of the night of his enlightenment. So Mara, the evil one, was determined that the Bodhisattva would not become enlightened. So he sent all kinds of obstacles to prevent it. So just to say that in the early Buddhism, the term Bodhisattva was reserved exclusively for the Buddha to be. So the Bodhisattva idea, as we know, developed quite a bit later in Mahayana. Anyway, so Mara, we could say, is a symbol for the forces active in the universe that work against enlightenment. So in the scriptures, Mara is portrayed literally as a large, ugly male form. And he has an army of fearsome, malformed creatures that attack the Buddha to be with swords, arrows, battle axes, and so on. So this is Mara in a literal sense. But the canon gives Mara a psychological meaning as well as the parts of the mind that produce craving, fear, and self-doubt. And I'm interested in this episode of the Buddha's life because of the, if you like, the use of the military language of weapons, attack, and so on. That the Buddha's teaching frequently uses that kind of martial terminology is perhaps surprising, given that the Buddha overwhelmingly is a peaceful figure. But as we heard last week in Silanata's talk, the Buddha was born into a powerful, wealthy family of the warrior caste. And in the Buddha's time, the warrior caste made up the most powerful sections of society, the rulers and the nobility. The Buddha had the best possible education available, but that education was made up of statecraft, but for the largest part for various military trainings. So archery, swordsmanship, chariot driving, elephant handling, and so on. So because of the Buddha's background, his conditioning, we might say, he regularly used the language of the warrior in his teaching. So he conveyed the Dharma in the language of heroism. The Buddha was described as a conqueror, a jinna, and the following of the Buddhist path described as a heroic quest. And of course, we do battle with samsara. So the image of the hero or the warrior is frequent in Buddhism. And the Buddha said that just like a king needs good warriors to defend his kingdom, so the Buddha needs heroic followers to support his teaching. So he compares the mind of a disciple to a well-fortified citadel. He compares the disciple's knowledge of the teachings to his armory of swords and spears, and his energy to his army. So in our struggle to overcome delusion, the canon, the Pali Canon, uses terms such as sword, arrow, shield, fortress, charioteer, and so on. And on the night of his enlightenment, the Buddha said that the perfections, the paramitas, were his sword and his weapons. So I want to read you a story from even a more distant past. This is a story from one of the Buddha's previous lives. So you may remember that during the night, that fateful night of his enlightenment, he also remembered his previous lives. And the stories of the Buddha's previous lives are told in the part of the Pali Canon called the Jatakas. And these Jatakas, the birth stories, are stories of the repeated births and deaths of the Bodhisattva, the Buddha to be. The earliest sections of the Jatakas are dated back to 5th century before Common Era, and the collection continued to develop up to the 3rd century Common Era. So these are very ancient texts. And throughout Buddhist history, perhaps even nowadays, the Jatakas were recited to various different audiences by the reciter monks, the Bhanakas. So in these stories, the Buddha tells of his former lives from the time he made his vow to become a Buddha, just at the time of the previous Buddha, Buddha Dipankara. And in those lives, the Bodhisattva is tested again and again in various ways, and he builds up the strengths, the experience, and the resources for his final birth. So in these stories, the Bodhisattva was sometimes born as a human being in different circumstances, as an untouchable merchant, warrior, minister, or king, amongst other humans. Sometimes he was born as an animal, so an elephant, a rabbit, a fish, a bird, a monkey, and sometimes as neither human nor animal, but as a tree spirit or a Naga king. And these stories are dramatic, they are adventurous, they are also funny, charming, irreverent, and heroic. In the stories, the Buddha is the narrator. And in the stories, he is shown with both his human foibles and his qualities of kindness and courage and wisdom. At the end of the story, the Buddha tells the role he played in the story himself, and often he also tells the role played by one of his disciples. And, of course, in the way of all good stories, all the baddies get reformed at the end as well. And so the structure of a Jataka is that there is a sort of introduction, a story of the present that then leads into the main story of the past. Often the story of the present doesn't seem to have much to do with the later story. But anyway, so just before I start reading the story, just like to draw your attention to a couple of things. So in that story, the Bodhisattva's father tells him to go and learn a craft. So this would have been some kind of martial art. And the other thing to pay attention to is the numbers. So there are 108 Brahmins invited to predict the future of the prince, the Buddha to be. And then the Bodhisattva in this story is called Prince Five Weapons. So the number 5 is important because although in the story the Bodhisattva has 5 material weapons, he also claims that he gets his strength from wisdom. And this might be either the wisdom of the 5 spiritual faculties, or perhaps the power of the 5 precepts. And then finally, as you hear the story, it might remind you of another much more recent story. Stiranaga, would you show us the one slide, which is a reference to the story? So just so you know where it's coming from, the story of the 5 weapons. It's Jataka number 55. And the main characters in this story are Prince 5 Weapons and a yaka called Furry Hug. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then I will begin. So once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king in Varanasi, the Bodhisattva took rebirth in the womb of the king's chief queen. When the day came for his naming ceremony, his parents plied 108 Brahmins with the pleasures of the senses and asked them about the marks on his body. Brahmins, who were highly skilled in reading the signs, discerned the splendor of his markings and explained them. The prince, great king, is endowed with great merit and luck, and he will succeed to the throne after you. He will be wise, the most excellent of men, and exhibit in Jambudvipa skills in 5 weapons. So when the parents heard the prophecy of the Brahmins, they gave the prince the name Prince 5 Weapons. Now when the prince had reached the age of discretion and was 16 years old, the king told him to go and learn a craft. With whom, sire, should I study? Go, son, to the city of Taxila in the kingdom of Kandara and study with the world-famous teacher there. Pay him with this fee. And the king sent him off with 1,000 pieces. So the prince went and trained in a craft, and as he was saying goodbye to his teacher, he accepted a gift of 5 weapons. Armed with these, he left Taxila and went on the road to Varanasi. While he was on the road, he came to a certain forest inhabited by a yaka called Furry Hug. At the entrance to the forest, people saw him and warned him off. Young man, do not go into the forest, as there is a yaka there called Furry Hug, who kills every man he meets. But the Bodhisattva placed his trust in himself and entered the forest like a fearless, maned lion. When he had reached the middle of the forest, the yaka caused himself to appear, the size of a palm tree, with his head as tall as a peaked roof house, eyes the size of bowls, and 2 tusks the size of bananas. He showed himself to the Bodhisattva with the white face, mottled belly, and dark hands and feet. "Where are you going? Stay there. You are my lunch," said the Yaka. Then the Bodhisattva said to him, "Yaka, I came here with trust in myself. You are careless that you approach me, as I will destroy you right here with the poisoned arrow." With these threats, he notched an arrow soaked in the deadliest poison and released it. It just stuck onto the Yaka's fur. Then he shot another and another, till he had shot 50. All of these also simply stuck in the Yaka's fur. The Yaka shook off all the arrows so that they fell off him at his feet, and then went up to the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva, challenging again, drew his sword and struck at the Yaka. But the sword, which was 33 inches long, stuck in the Yaka's hair like before. Then the Bodhisattva struck him with the billhook, but it stuck in his hair too. Then he struck him with the battle hammer, but that stuck in his hair as well. Recognizing the Yaka's sticky nature, the prince said, "Sir Yaka, you have not heard of me before, but I am Prince Five Weapons. When I came into this forest that is under your control, I did not put my trust in bows or anything like that, but entered with trust only in myself. And today, I am going to beat you so that you are crushed to powder." Showing his resolve, he roared a challenge and hit the Yaka with his right hand. It stuck in his fur. So he hit him with his left hand. It got stuck in his fur too. So he hit him with his right foot. It then got stuck. He hit him with the left foot, and that got stuck. He then hit him with his head, saying, "I'll crush you into powder," as he bumped him. But that got stuck in the fur too. So with 5 blows given, he was trapped in 5 places and hung suspended. But he was still without fear and quite confident. Then the Yaka thought to himself, "This is a lion of a man, a nobly born man, and not just an ordinary man. In all the time that I have been killing on this road, I have never seen such a man to equal him. I wonder why he is not afraid." Feeling unable to eat him, he asked, "Young man, why are you not frightened with the fear of death?" "Yaka," the Bodhisattva replied, "why should I be frightened? Death is destined for each life, and inside my belly is a diamond sword. If you eat me, you will not be able to digest this weapon. It will chop your bowels into pieces, and that will be the end of your life. So we will both perish. Because of this, I am not frightened." For it is said, the Bodhisattva was talking about the weapon of wisdom within himself. When he heard this, the Yaka thought, "This young man is telling the truth. It would not be possible for my stomach to digest a morsel of flesh, even the size of a kidney bean seed, from the body of this lion-like man. I let him go." Terrified of death, he let the Bodhisattva go. "Young man, you are a man like a lion. I will not eat your flesh. You are freed from my hands, just as the moon is freed from the mouth of Rahu, the eclipse." Go and make the circle of your relatives and friends happy. Then the Bodhisattva said to him, Yaka, I will leave you, but you have performed evil. You have been cruel and have blood on your hands. You took rebirth as a yaka as a result of eating blood and flesh. If you remain here and do more evil, you will go from darkness into darkness. But now that you have seen me, it will not be possible for you to do evil. The destruction of life produces rebirth in hell, an animal realm, in the realm of ghosts, or in the body of an ashra. And if there is a rebirth amongst men, then it produces a shortened lifespan. In this and in other ways, the Bodhisattva spoke about the wretchedness of the 5 bad kinds of behavior. He gave praise to the 5 precepts, encouraging the yaka in different ways, and gave a Dhamma talk, making him amenable. He established the yaka in the 5 precepts. Warning the yaka to be careful, the Bodhisattva left the forest, and at the entrance he told people what had happened. Armed with 5 weapons, he then went on to Varanasi and saw his mother and father. In the course of time, he ruled his kingdom in accordance with Dhamma, being generous and performing such like auspicious deeds, and when he died, he was reborn in accordance with his karma. And the Buddha explained the connections with birth. At that time, Angulimala was the yaka, and I was Prince 5 Weapons. So that's the story.